Hello, everybody. My name is Portia Sabin. I am the president of the Music Business Association. As many of you know, we had to pivot away from having a physical event this year, as most people did. And as a result, we moved into virtual events. We broke our programming for Music Biz 2020 into multiple tracks and different events. And we hope that those of you who are here have been able to take advantage of some of the events that we've had in the past. And we also have some great stuff coming up. As you saw in the welcoming slides, we have a law conference next week. So this is not just for lawyers, but it's great information for artists and songwriters because it'll help you understand your rights. Very, very important. So you can check that out. We'll put the link in the chat box for that so you guys can register for that. That's going to be a really good one. We have been working with Songtrust on the indie artist and songwriter programming for over 3 years now. And we had the Independent Artist and Songwriter Forum programs at Music Biz when we do it live for the last few years. So we are thrilled today to partner with Songtrust again to bring you this 2-day Zoom event. We are focused on informing both the creative and business communities of the best ways to maximize their global royalty collections. So thanks for coming. Enjoy the program. We're excited to have you, and I know this is going to be a great event. So without further ado, let me introduce CJ Olivieri, who is the Senior Director of Client Acquisition at Songtrust, to intro the rest of the program. Thanks to you guys.
Thank you, Portia. Yeah, it's welcome everyone to day one of our global music publishing and royalties for creators. There's going to be 2 sessions today. The first one is going to be focused on music publishing 101, kind of the fundamentals and basics that everyone should understand about music publishing. And then it will be followed by a royalty checklist session, which is going to go a little bit more in depth about the different types of royalties and how to maximize your earnings as an independent creator. So before I hand it over to George and Noel, I just kind of want to give you some background about Songtrust, what we do, and kind of how we're positioned within the market. Songtrust is the world's largest independent music publishing administrative service. What that means is, we represent over 2 million songs for over 300,000 songwriters, producers, music publishing companies, allowing them to administer their songs on a song-by-song basis globally to over 50 different international pay sources to collect their performance and mechanical royalties. So, with that being said, I'll pass it over to George Clark and Noel Gambuti, who will go through the music publishing 101, those fundamentals that everyone should really understand in order to be successful in the music business. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let me start the presentation. Welcome everyone to Music Publishing 101 with Songtrust. We're very thrilled to welcome everyone. And as CJ mentioned, George and I will be going over some of the more fundamental and basic concepts within the publishing industry. It's very important to know at least these basics, regardless of what sector you're in. So whether you're focused on the label side, the publishing side, or you're just not really sure about publishing yet, it's definitely an important area to learn about. And we know that this is super confusing, especially if it's new, and we are still learning more things every day, even though we've been in the industry. I've been at Songtrust for about 2 years, and George just hit his 1-year mark this summer. So we know that it's confusing, especially to learn virtually, so just hang with us. We will be doing a Q&A at the end, so definitely stick around for that if you have questions throughout the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. A little bit of background on me, I guess. I went to school at Columbia College, Chicago. I took a couple of music publishing courses there, which was great. Thought it was very interesting, and then moved to New York about 3 years ago. I had a friend and former classmate who was working at Downtown Music Publishing and Songtrust, who told me about some open positions, and I had some background in sales and kind of client-facing positions, so it was a good fit on Noelle's team. And like she said, I'm about a year in now, and slightly less confused at what's going on in the industry, definitely. But Noelle can even attest to this. I asked so many questions when I first started. It is very complicated if you're just jumping into this stuff. Don't expect to catch it all just in this one presentation. Give yourself the time and patience to get some of this stuff. We're going to break down a lot of the integral parts of the global publishing system so that you can really get a base understanding. But it is gonna change based on where you are and the organizations that you're working with. This is a little agenda of what we're going to be going through today. We're going to get to know the breakdown of an original song and the separate copyrights that are managed through that song. We'll get to know the essential parts of the global publishing system. So just key kind of moving pieces that you should know to be able to set yourself up the best that you can to collect on all the royalties that you're due. Then we'll get to know some important data points that are used within the industry to ensure that your songs are being properly registered. And we'll go through the different types of publishing deals that are available to you as well.
Great. So just jumping right into it, let's start out with what rights you get and where it all starts. So basically, when you write a song and that song is in its tangible form, you own the copyright and you own the publishing of that song, unless you decide to sign it away, which we do not recommend. But having the song in its tangible form, it could be anything from like physically writing that song down on a piece of paper, or more commonly nowadays, saving it on a program on your computer like Logic. So once you have that song in its tangible form, you own the copyright and you own the publishing of that song. So that's really important starting off.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that ownership comes these various rights. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll run through these real fast. Of course, the right to reproduce or make copies of that song, of that work, then the right to distribute those copies. Of course, you have the right to perform it in public and the right to make derivatives. That means like remixes or what have you. And then the right to display the work publicly. For our intents and purposes is going to mean more so to digitally transmit that song. So you can think of it as, putting the song up on iTunes would be an expression of that right. Through those various rights, royalties are generated. So we'll talk about mechanical royalties, performance royalties, and then microsync. Mechanical specifically, those royalties are generated from reproductions of the work. So you can think of a CD sale, a vinyl print, any type of physical kind of transaction of that work. An iTunes download would also create a mechanical royalty. And there's also a mechanical royalty that's generated from interactive streaming. And specifically what I mean by interactive is that the listener has a choice as to what they're listening to. So when somebody clicks your song on Spotify, that's an interactive stream, which is going to create a mechanical royalty. Performance royalties, on the other hand, those are generated from live performance of the work. So it could be at a bar, club, music venue, what have you. And digital streaming is also going to create a performance royalty. So keep in mind there that with interactive digital streaming on platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, both a mechanical and a performance royalty is going to be generated. Microsync, it's questionable whether this is actually a royalty type, right, Noel? But we like to talk about it because it is kind of a big thing. YouTube being, one of the largest streaming platforms out there. Microsync is going to relate to those type of streams, not necessarily with film or television, but on platforms like YouTube or Vimeo, those streams create revenue, which we call microsync. And like an interactive stream on Spotify or Apple Music, this is going to generate both a performance and a mechanical royalty that's associated.
Exactly. So the main two types of royalties on the publishing side are performance and mechanical. And like George mentioned, microsync does end up breaking down into both of those types of royalties, but we like to list microsync because it works so much differently than the other types of royalties that are generated. And often we get asked so much about YouTube and how to collect from YouTube, so we definitely want to include that in the presentation.
Right. So I'll take the lead here. I think, as a member of the Songtrust team and as a client-facing member, one of the biggest questions that I think I get asked are, people who are kind of new to the industry, and they'll get on the phone with me and they'll say, "Hey, well, I'm already with, let's say, DistroKid. Aren't they already collecting my royalties?" And yes, that is true. They are collecting a portion of your royalties, but it's due to the master recording owner, and your publishing or the royalties that are due to the use of your composition are completely separate. And I think once you get kind of that fundamental concept down, all of this publishing information becomes a lot easier. Keep in mind that in the session after us, some of our colleagues are going to be going into royalties specifically in a lot more depth. So definitely stick around for that. But here I just want to clear up a couple of maybe common misconceptions about master recording management and how it differs from the composition. And I think a great way to look at that is through a cover song. So I was looking into this example last night a little bit more. I think it's really interesting, just so bear with me. In 1974, Dolly Parton wrote a song called "I Will Always Love You." Super interesting story. She wrote it on the same night that she wrote another huge song, Jolene. So she put that song out on RCA Nashville, which is an imprint of Sony Music. But at the time she had a publishing company, and so she owned the publishing. And what that does is gives her access to these performance and mechanical royalties that we talked about on the composition side. Her label, RCA Nashville, is going to have ownership of that master recording and then access to those master recording royalties. Funny enough, 1974, that same year, Elvis Presley was interested in recording his own version of that song. So Elvis Presley's manager approached Dolly Parton to see if he could get a license. At the time, Elvis Presley, is Elvis Presley. So generally, if he was going to cover somebody's song, he would take half of their publishing. He would take half of their ownership. Dolly Parton didn't want to give that up. She owned it outright. So she said no. If you fast forward to 1992, Whitney Houston covers that song. She makes her own rendition of that song. And it grows to be not only one of the top selling songs of all time, but the top selling song by a female vocalist of all time. So as that song is growing in popularity and use, Dolly Parton is retaining ownership of the composition, ownership of the publishing, and access to those performance and mechanical royalties, even though Whitney Houston was the one who released the song. So she released the song under an imprint that's actually started by Clive Davis and is owned by Sony as well. One more fast forward, I promise this is the last one. Last year, 2019, Sony ATV Music Publishing signs Dolly Parton and takes over her catalog. So at the end of the day, all that said and done, Sony wins, yes, but also it's just an important way to dictate and to note that the management of these two copyrights is very separate. The management and collection of royalties of these two copyrights is very separate. So in the US, we have master recording royalties and digital performance royalties. Those master recording revenues, they're going to be collected by a distributor or a label. So many people have independent distributors like DistroKid and CD Baby. They're the ones collecting that master recording revenue that's due to the use of your master recording. There's also digital performance royalties. Those are collected by an organization in the US called Sound Exchange. And what that is specifically is non-interactive streaming. So like we talked about before with interactive streaming, where the listener has a lot of choice as to what they're listening to, non-interactive is of course the opposite, right? So think free Pandora accounts and internet radio. That type of digital streaming is creating a digital performance royalty that is collected and distributed by SoundExchange in the US and due to the owner of the master.
Right, so as you can see, there's a lot of different revenue streams coming from this original song. Today, we are going to be focusing on the left side of this diagram, so the composition side, but we definitely wanted to mention the master recording side since a lot of creators today are independent and writing and releasing their own music, which is great, and they are owed both sides of this diagram. And what George mentioned about SoundExchange in the US, I do want to mention since we probably have some international people here today that we call them digital performance royalties here in the US and SoundExchange collects them. But similarly, for example, in the UK, they are called neighboring rights royalties. They're still owed to the master recording owner, but they are collected by an organization called PPL. So each country would have, a similar organization for neighboring rights collection, but here in the US, we call them digital performance royalties. So that hopefully clears up any confusion on that. Okay, so now this is just a diagram of the composition side of the previous diagram. As George mentioned, there is both performance and mechanical royalties on this side that are owed to the owner of the publishing. On the performance side, there is both a writer's and a publisher's share. So performance royalties consist of both a writer's and a publisher's share. Typically, that is split 50-50. And in the US, we have organizations called performance rights organizations, also known as PROs, and they are responsible for collecting these performance royalties and paying out the writer's share to the affiliated writer who is registered on each song, and the publisher's share to the affiliated publishing entity registered on that song. There also are organizations called CMOs, which is collective management organizations, and those exist outside of the US and Canada, and they will collect on both performance and mechanical royalties. So depending on where you are in the world, you might be affiliated with a PRO or you might be affiliated with a CMO. So that definitely differs when you're thinking about the global scale of things. For the purpose of this diagram, we have stuck to just US societies just to kind of simplify it. So in the US, we have ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. Moving over to the mechanical royalty side of the diagram, there is only a publisher's share when you're talking about mechanical royalties. So oftentimes you do have to be working with a publisher in order to collect this side of the royalties that you're owed. And as George mentioned, these are owed to a lot of different types of uses, but I think most prevalently today would be digital streaming, that interactive streaming that is generating both performance and mechanical royalties. So keep that in mind. But mechanical royalties are paid out by either collective management organizations, CMOs that I mentioned earlier, or mechanical pay sources. Here in the US, some different organizations that pay out mechanical royalties would be Harry Fox Agency, Music Reports, MediaNet. They all collect and pay out mechanical royalties to publishers, the affiliated publishers on each song. Something worth noting is that, once 2021 begins in the US, the mechanical royalty responsibilities are going to lie with the MLC. So those organizations are not going to be paying or responsible for paying the mechanical royalties any longer. It's supposed to go over to the MLC's control, and ideally that's going to be making the mechanical royalty rate higher. So that's definitely all good news for creators.
For sure. And
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry to cut you off. Here on this slide, we have just some relevant information or data that is commonly used to register songs at these sources that Noelle just spoke about. We can start here with the title. That's going to be an obvious one. The title is going to include any various versions that it can be written as. So sometimes things are retitled or they have alternate titles. You'll include all of that information usually on a song registration. Then, of course, we have songwriter name and IPI. The songwriter name is, of course, important. We need to know who to pay out, right? And then the IPI is your interested party's information number, which is used to uniquely identify you as a songwriter or a publisher. Usually this comes from your PRO or your CMO. And it's really used as kind of an ID for you as a songwriter or as a publisher, so that within this industry, you can be identified and paid out properly. The other side of that is having confirmed splits. So once we have, of course, the song title and everyone kind of who has ownership of the song, we need to know how that ownership is divided. And splits are going to come into play when the song is ready to be registered. So registrations have to be complete. They have to have all of the information about everybody who has ownership on that song, even if you're only collecting on your own behalf.
Yeah, and confirmed splits are extremely important. I think oftentimes they're overlooked, and a lot of people that we talk to on a daily basis when we're having conversations with producers, songwriters, especially the people who are not releasing the music, they often won't know what the full splits are of the song. So we actually do have a split sheet template at Songtrust. If you just Google Songtrust split sheet, it'll come up, and you definitely want to have a confirmed split sheet for each song that you work on and each song that you are going to have ownership of, so that you can be sure that you and all of your other co-writers are going to be registering this song correctly, accurately, with all of your correct information. So you want to make sure that you're giving your collaborators your full legal name that you have affiliated at your PRO, the PRO that you're affiliated with, and your IPI number. And you want to make sure that you have that information of your co-writers as well. And then some additional information about song registrations would be the ISWC and the ISRC code. These, I know, sound too similar, but I'm going to try to break them down for you. So the ISWC is the International Standard Musical Work Code, and this is a code that is assigned to a single composition. So there's one ISWC for each original composition. This code is assigned by your PRO when you register the song there. And then the ISRC is the International Standard Recording Code. And this is a code that is assigned to a single recorded version of your composition. So like in George's example previously, there could be multiple ISRC codes for the multiple recordings that are out there of Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You. There should be a single ISWC for the original composition and that original registration of that song.
Right, and ISRCs, I think you said, ISWCs usually come from your PRO or CMO. ISRCs are usually going to be assigned by your label or distributor. You can also actually purchase ISRCs yourself as well.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think it's valuable to go over kind of this, to follow, I guess, the stream of a song. And just kind of break it down to review everything that we've kind of said so far. So let's imagine, just for example's sake, that Noel and I write a song together and we release that song. Because of the global music landscape that we currently live in, that song might blow up in the UK, let's say. It's starting to stream a lot. So like we have ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC in the US. In the UK, they have an organization called PRS that collects performance royalties. They also have an organization called MCPS that collects mechanical royalties. And so when our song is streaming there, PRS and MCPS are going to generate metadata that says Spotify owes us, as the songwriters, X amount of royalties for X amount of uses of that music. And so to accurately and in a timely fashion collect on that revenue that we've generated there, it's best for us to actually register our song, register our ownership at these two organizations. So a company like Songtrust, that's a publishing administrator, that's what we do, right? We have a network of organizations where we take your song registration and actually get it in at these collection sources, at these pay sources. To ensure that you're collecting on what you're doing.
Exactly. And like George mentioned, the global landscape of the music industry is definitely expanding. It's sometimes we talk to people that are surprised. They're like, yeah, my band put out this song and randomly we're really popular in Germany. Like we weren't expecting that, but we need to make sure that we're collecting on that. And oftentimes when you are working with a distributor, you're able to see where your music is being used. So that gives you an idea of, oh, like I'm not just, I don't just have US listeners, they're all around the world. And I don't want to miss out on those royalties that are generated from those different streams and those different uses. Okay.
Absolutely.
So unallocated royalties, tricky topic. Not everybody's favorite topic, but George, I'm going to let you start on this timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. Unallocated royalties. This happens when a finished song goes out into distribution and it starts creating a royalty stream. It starts being used, and so there's those royalties being generated. And that payout to the songwriters is interrupted for some various reason. It could be due to the fact that the song is unregistered, right? It could be due to the fact that as a writer, you don't have a collection society. PRO or a CMO and an IPI number, right? You're not recognized kind of within this collection network. It could be due to the fact that you don't have publishing. So some of those shares, the publisher shares specifically that Noel talked about earlier, you wouldn't have access to. So that payout would be interrupted. Or it could be due to the fact that you have all of these things, but the data has been entered incorrectly. One more thing too, it could be due to the fact that you've entered all of this data, but your collaborators have entered it in another way, and which that would usually cause a conflict in which the revenue to both of you would freeze, and so nobody would be paid. And if that happens, there's a retroactive wait period, which is the time that these organizations that are collecting your royalties will essentially hang on to that money, waiting for you to resolve or tell them where to send it. From Songtrust, we've seen it's in general about 2 to 3 years. It is different based on the organization that you're working with. All of them have different stipulations as far as how long they're going to hang on to this money. But that's generally what we've seen. You have about 2 to 3 years to collect. And then I'll let Noel tell you what happens after that.
I may be the bad guy. So just to go back to the conflicting claims portion that George mentioned about why there might be songwriter payout, that's just another reason why it's so important to confirm your splits with your co-writers. Because if everyone's on the same page, we know that George and I both have 50% ownership. We're both gonna register our song with those splits and there's not gonna be a conflict. So that's just another point to make, that you always wanna make sure that you have those confirmed splits for all your songs. So once that songwriter payout is interrupted, it enters that retroactive waiting period, which on average is about 2 to 3 years. And once that waiting period expires, your royalties are going to enter what's commonly known as the black box. Sounds scary, kind of is scary, because those unallocated royalties are going to be reallocated to that society's top earners based off of market share. And what that means usually is that, the major publishers who control most of the market, they have the most market share, they're going to receive those unallocated royalties from that society. Those publishers would then redistribute the royalties that they have received from the society to their clients, also based off of market share. So it really ends up in the hands of the top artists and the top songwriters, top producers of the market, who have essentially already earned more than enough money, who would be receiving your money as kind of like a little bonus. You can think of those clients as artists such as Drake and Taylor Swift, and regardless of who the artists are that are going to be receiving those reallocated royalties, they are not you and they're not who created the song. So this is a really important takeaway, to make sure that you understand this part of the industry and that you know what needs to be done in terms of collecting your publishing royalties, so that you can actually receive them, you're owed them, you put in the work of writing the song, producing the song, and you definitely want to make sure that you are not going to miss out on those royalties.
Yeah, absolutely. Bottom line, that ownership is generating money for you as the songwriter, as the publisher, and you want to make sure you're best set up to collect all of that.
Yeah. And even if you are set up with, let's say, the PRO in your territory, so let's say I'm based in the US and I am affiliated at ASCAP as a songwriter. That does not cover me for mechanical royalties at all in the US. And then I'm also not really covered for my global collection. So this brings us right into our next topic of why it's important to be working with a publisher. It's really to access the global performance and mechanical royalties you're owed instead of just receiving a small portion of that. So the three examples of different types of publishing deals are having your own publishing company and handling everything yourself, working with a publishing administrator. Songtrust falls in that bucket. And then you have signing a traditional publishing deal, which is also commonly known as like a co-publishing agreement. Because I'm sure, like, as you've gathered through the previous slides, there's a lot of work to be done to ensure proper royalty collection. And that's why you want to be working with a publisher. There are a lot of different options that depend on your preferences and what's important to you. So we're going to try to break down each of these publishing deals. I'm going to start off with having your own publishing company and what that entails. So in this example, you'd create an LLC or a business, however that works in your country that you are, and you would affiliate it at your PRO that you are affiliated with as a writer. But ideally, you would also be affiliating that publishing company and registering your works wherever your music is being played. So if I'm in the US, I would create my publishing company and I would affiliate it with ASCAP. But then I have to consider all those mechanical royalties that are being generated. So I'm going to go to all three different organizations in the US that collect mechanical royalties, which are Harry Fox Agency, MediaNet, and Music Reports, to try to collect my mechanical royalties from the US. But then I realized, wait a minute, what about my global royalties? And then I have to try to track where my music is most popular and try to get my publishing company affiliated at those societies. You might realize through this process that that might not be possible in all of the countries that your music is playing. For example, you might have to have certain requirements that are not that easy to get. Like you might have to have, if you're a small publishing company, you might have to have a certain amount of writers who are at that society. Let's say, like, for an example, I'm a publishing company and I want to be affiliated with GEMA in Germany. Let's say I need to have a certain amount of German songwriters in order to be affiliated with that society as a publisher. You could also have to have an address there. There are tons of different requirements that differ based on the society. So it's a lot to take on. It's very hands-on. But it does allow you to protect all your assets and keep all of your publishing royalties. I do want to mention that having your own publishing company and starting off this way, it doesn't prohibit you from signing any future publishing deals. So if I decided to go this route and maybe I realized down the line, this is too much work for me, I want to focus on making my music and growing my company, but I don't want to do all of this admin type work. Just because I created a publishing company doesn't mean I can't go and sign another publishing deal.
Right. And so to solve for a lot of these difficulties that come with starting your own publishing company, as Noel mentioned, traditional publishing offers, the admin services of registering your songs and collecting your royalties, along with a couple of other opportunities for you. A traditional publishing deal would usually come from a company like Sony ATV, as we mentioned before, or like Downtown Music Publishing. And along with the administration of your copyrights, they might also offer you creative or sync opportunities. So what that would mean is they might shop your song for other recording artists to actually take on and release their own version of. They might shop your song to music supervisors for placements in TV and film. Or other type of kind of exploitative opportunities to increase the value of your catalog. there are also usually advances available. And what an advance means is that that company is giving you essentially a loan on the royalties that they believe they can collect on behalf of your catalog. And so for those services, traditionally you would give up about 25 or 50% of the copyright to that company. They would own a part of your song. You would also probably be in a longer deal with them because if they're taking on your entire catalog, they're going to want some time to be able to exploit it as best that they can, raise the value, and create value for themselves as well. In publishing and administration, we take out a lot of these creative opportunities and maybe advances and kind of boil that deal down to the royalty collection aspect. And what that means is that you have the ability to pursue these creative type services and sync placements on your own while keeping 100% ownership of your copyrights. And you're usually agreeing to a little bit more flexible terms. So Songtrust, like Noel said, is an example of a publishing administration deal. You would keep 100% ownership of your copyrights. You would sign on a song by song basis, meaning you have no obligation to turn over your entire catalog to us. And you can choose, one by one, which songs you would like to register. With us, it's a 1-year term. So you're locked in where Songtrust is collecting your publishing revenue for a year. And after that, you could take it to another publisher. And for that service, you usually give up a small commission fee. With Songtrust, it's 15%. So keep in mind, though, that you're not actually giving up ownership. As I said, you're just giving up a portion of the royalties collected on your behalf.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the cons that are listed here on publishing administration could also be seen as pros. I just want to mention that, like, not having creative services in your publishing deal, it does allow you to keep your ownership and handle that on your own. You could work with like a third party that you have found that you really like, or you could, seek out creative opportunities for yourself and grow your network on your own. And in terms of the advances not usually being available, that does allow you to start earning sooner. So even though you're not receiving like a lump sum amount of cash right when you sign the deal, you're going to receive your royalties on a rolling basis as they come in. As opposed to if you do receive an advance, you're going to have to make up that money first before you start earning on what you're owed. So it could be more of a financial decision whether you want to have, rolling payments coming in as time goes on, or if you want to receive all of that money up front, kind of similar to like a loan where you would have to pay it back.
Right. Cool.
Okay, so it looks like we've come to our question and answers. We probably have some questions to get to in the chat box, but before we get there, George is going to go over these frequently asked questions that we see a lot just through a lot of the other webinars that we do. So George is going to take it away there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, these are some common questions that we see. Can I work with a publisher if I'm already with a collection society like BMI or ASCAP or whatever that might look like in whatever territory you are? Yes, absolutely. So as a songwriter, you should be affiliated with a collection society. Like we said, that does give you an IPI number that allows you to then take that song and register it with other organizations that are collecting on different royalty types in different territories. Another one is my distributor or label collecting my publishing royalties? It does depend. It widely differs. So if you're with a distributor like DistroKid, for example, that does not have a publishing administration service kind of built in, you won't be collecting your publishing royalties through your distributor label. But say you're with like a TuneCore or a CD Baby that has a publishing administration service built in, like CD Baby Pro or TuneCore Publishing Administration, then yes, you would have opted in to their publishing royalty collection service or their publishing administration service. And so you would be collecting your publishing royalties in that way. How long does global registration take for publishers? It's a 6 to 9 month registration period. And that's globally. That is kind of a daunting timeline, but I think when you realize the scale of organizations that there are to get you fully covered, it starts to make a lot more sense. 6 to 9 months is a long time, but it's what we all work with in the publishing industry. And then it does work quarterly. So a publishing administrator like Songtrust, we're going to be receiving quarterly payments from our pay sources and then paying our clients out quarterly as well. And then, of course, can I collect publishing royalties for a song that I worked on that was released by someone else? Yes. So I talk to a lot of producers, I'm sure Noel does as well, who don't necessarily release their own songs. Maybe they're producing on, somebody else's music, and they've gotten into a publishing agreement with them where they actually own a portion of the publishing on that song. Keep in mind that you can collect on that ownership even though you didn't release the song. That ownership is still yours. And as long as, I know we've really hammered in the split sheets thing, but it is super important. As long as you have that correct information, as long as you have those correct splits and all of your songwriters' information, you can go ahead and register that and collect on what you're doing. Exactly.
So let's get into some questions from the audience now. So I'm going to answer this question. It says, what is the significance of sharing IPI numbers with other creditors on the split sheets? I understand full name is listed with PRO and split percentage are required when sharing with collaborators. Will sharing this number expose or put anyone in jeopardy? So when you are writing your split sheets, you don't just want to put your full name and your PRO and the split percentage. You want to also include the IPI number. That's probably one of the most important parts that you want to include. Because let's say George Clark, I'm sure that there's other George Clarks out there that live in the US that could be affiliated with the same PRO as George. So you want to make sure that you are giving, the IPI number on these split sheets as well. Okay, let's get to another one. Where do you purchase an ISRC for an indie artist who is not with a label or a publisher? George, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe that you can purchase ISRCs online. There is an official website, right? I think it's literally just ISRC.com, right? Yeah.
I've been getting ads for it on Instagram because I say it so much.
Funny.
But I also think that you can Google like ISRC team. That's how it comes up when I get ads. So you can purchase ISRCs there, but you don't have to purchase ISRCs if you are releasing your music through a distributor, because you would be automatically assigned one when you release that song.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be careful when you are purchasing ISRCs. I know that I've heard instances of people kind of purchasing from less than savory kind of sources. So I would just, keep in mind that there are official sources and make sure you're getting it from them.
Yeah, and I would say in the best interest of you as a creator, you want to be working with a distributor because they are going to be getting your music out to all of the streaming platforms. So it's in your best interest that, like, let's say somebody hears one of your songs on YouTube and they're like, oh, I really like this artist. They're going to search you up on the streaming service that they use, which could be, a wide variety of services. So you want to make sure that your music is available to listen to on all these different services. And you can explore the different distributors and see which one you like the most. Some examples would be DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, United Masters. So definitely do your research and see which one you want to work with. But I would recommend that that's the best way to have your music available for everyone to listen to. They would then pay you your master recording royalties and assign you an ISRC code.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next one. You mentioned in the composition part that for mechanical royalties, you have to be working with a publisher. In the case of an indie artist, are we losing money? Obviously, the artist is the publisher in this case, but we don't work with a publisher.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, we were talking to CJ yesterday about this presentation, and he made a great point. Having publishing ownership does not necessarily make you a publisher. Being a publisher means that you're taking the actions to actually register these songs and collect on what you're due. So you do have publishing ownership, but the registration of that ownership and the collection of those royalties is what makes you a publisher. So it does take some steps to exercise that ownership.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are, I went back to this slide so that you could see, the differences again of who collects both types of royalties on the publishing side. Um, to be sure that you're collecting both and to be sure that you're collecting both from all over the world, you do want to be working with a publisher, a publishing administrator, or if you're at the point in your career where you want to sign a traditional publishing deal and you have those on the table, you would also want to consider those. Make sure that when you are considering any deals, obviously, like I'm not a lawyer, but just word to the wise, you want to make sure you're reading over those contracts and making sure that you're not giving away some sort of ownership or creative control that you don't want to be giving away. So you always want to be on top of what you're signing, which sounds simple, but we have seen everything. So we want to make sure everybody's got that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see one, Noelle, that I think a couple of people have kind of pointed to. So she asked, if I sign up with Songtrust today, how long will it usually take for my songs that have been out for 2 months for me to start collecting royalties from them?
Mm-hmm. So the global registration process that it takes for publishers to, take the songs that you've registered with us, register those songs with all the societies we work with. At Songtrust, we do work with over 50. So to get those songs out there to all those organizations and for those societies to accept the registrations, process the data, match it up with what they have from the DSPs, it takes about 6 to 9 months, I would say, on average, and you would start earning after that. Whether your song has been out for 5 years or 2 months, the global registration process would be the same timeline.
And Noelle, I think there's quite a few questions in like the Q&A chat specifically. I was looking in the general chat.
Yeah, I'm looking in the Q&A chat now. I'm going to pick out a few more before we close out, but it looks like there are a lot of questions about Songtrust specifically, and I think we kind of skipped over this slide. I might have clicked the next button too quickly, but just to go over in general, just to like get those questions out of the way, we are a global publishing administrator, and we basically enable our clients to collect from all of the societies that we have direct affiliations with, which is over 52 right now. That number is always growing due to our lovely societies affiliations team. And using Songtrust is a way to maintain your ownership and make sure that you are not missing out on royalties on the publishing side. So off of that, we do have another question about Songtrust. So if someone else is recording my song, I don't own the masters, does Songtrust still collect for that song?
Yes, absolutely. That is exactly what Songtrust does. We collect on your publishing ownership, which is the ownership of your composition. We do not collect on your master ownership. So that is exactly what you would need. Yes, is a publishing administrator to be able to collect on those royalties that you're due as owner of that composition.
So another question here, for the composition side of a work, can you also gain royalties from non-interactive streaming, or is it just on the master recording side?
So yeah, that's a great question. Noelle, actually, do you want to take that one? I'm not actually as familiar. Yeah.
So for non-interactive streaming, those would be anything from like free Pandora accounts, like streams on there, as well as like Sirius XM, internet radio, basically any streaming service or website that the user is not choosing the next song that they're listening to. That's what non-interactive means. And those are generating only royalties on the master side, which in the US, you could see here, they're collected by Sound Exchange. In my previous example, in the UK, they're collected by PPL, and they are called neighboring rights royalties. So they are just on the master side. They are not owed to the composition owners. Okay.
Lots of questions.
Yeah. Do you have any others that you want to get to, George, or?
So I saw a good question about the MLC. Will the MLC collect mechanicals that are generated outside the US? As far as I know, that is no. the MLC will operate exclusively within the US, and for digital mechanicals, I think also outside of their scope is physical mechanicals that would be generated from like physical CD and vinyl sales as well.
Yes. Moving down, I think that, okay, so should you consider publishing if you are a smaller and independent artist with just a few streams? This is definitely a question that we get a lot, like when is the appropriate time for me to get my publishing in order? And the way that you should think about it is, setting up your songs for collection on the publishing side is just as important as releasing your songs, because you're releasing the songs obviously with the intention of getting a lot of streams. And when you do get those streams, you don't want to miss out on the royalties that you're owed. So it's really setting up the infrastructure for you to grow your brand. And when you are getting those streams, even if it's not millions of streams, you still are owed money.
Yeah, I definitely always encourage newer songwriters, producers, artists to try and get this stuff set up as early as possible, just so it's a part of their workflow later on down the road, and you're not backtracking to try and set this stuff up after the fact and allowing any of these royalties to go unallocated.
Here's a good question. For publishers, what is the difference between representing writers versus controlling a writer's catalog? So publishers can enter an infinite number of different types of publishing deals with their clients, because everything, you make the contract and you both agree on that. But I would say most commonly what we see is that, publishers are either responsible for administering their clients' catalogs. So that would mean that they're responsible for collecting, doing the global registration and royalty collection process, which they can put through Songtrust if they choose. Versus, entering a co-publishing agreement with their clients where the publishing company would get partial ownership of that songwriter's original ownership. So let's say I enter a co-publishing agreement with my publisher and I write all my music myself, I compose it, I am the only songwriter. The writer's share would be that I own 100%, but the publisher's share would be that I own 50 and that my publisher owns 50. There's also sometimes a publisher will, like you said here, what I think you were alluding to is controlling a writer's catalog. And I think that would mean that you would own their publishing outright and that you would just pretty much, any publishing royalties that they're owed would go to you. And whatever you do with those royalties, whether it's sharing it with that writer or that client, is, up to you and your agreement with them. So as we mentioned previously in the presentation, we do have some colleagues of ours presenting more in depth about royalties after this. So I'm not really going to answer a lot of those questions because I want you to get a good idea and a good baseline. And from that presentation, you will learn a lot more about the royalties that you're owed, not only on the publishing side, but on the master side as well. And then tomorrow, day 2 of this Songtrust presentations with Music Biz, we will have other colleagues of ours going into the complexities of music publishing and really breaking down and building on this foundation that we have gone over today.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're still confused, hang in there. More to come.
Yes.
And feel free to reach out to Noelle or I with questions as well.
Yeah, so also we have a lot of other educational resources available. We have a modern guide to music publishing, which is like a little ebook that our team works really hard on and we get a lot of great feedback on. So if you just want to search around on Songtrust's website, even if you just Google Songtrust Modern Guide to Music Publishing, it would definitely come right up. And look over that, share it with your colleagues. We do have a split sheet template, a royalties checklist, which I'm sure they're going to be sharing in the next presentation. We have a blog, a newsletter, socials, so definitely keep up to date with us. We're always trying to spread more knowledge about the music publishing industry to democratize it and make sure that everybody knows enough to collect what they're owed. But if you do have any other Songtrust specific questions or you're interested in getting started, both George and my email are listed here and you can reach out to either of us via email.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everybody. It's been great presenting. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy the next few presentations.
All right, thank you, everyone. So yeah, that was George and Noel. They kind of really appreciate them taking the time today to go through some of those fundamentals for everyone. Up next, we're going to go over the royalties checklist, which is going to be, a little bit more drilled down on some of those main royalty types, kind of going over, how they're generated, who collects them, what you as an individual creator needs to do in order to access and maximize those royalties, and some of the companies that you can work with in order to make sure that you are globally accessing all of these different royalty types. I want to see if we have everyone in the room already. Do we have Tammy and Ben in here already? Hello, Tammy. And it looks like we got both of you. Tammy and Ben, can you both hear me? I just want to make sure you're good to go.
Yep.
Awesome. Before we kick off, I want to say thank you again to Portia and the entire Music Business Association for allowing us to participate in this 2-day event. We really enjoy partnering with this organization that you guys do so much great work. And yeah, so before we kind of jump in, again, we're going to be going through a little bit more in depth about the different royalty types that are generated, not just off the publishing, but also off the master recording copyrights. And again, my name is CJ Oliveri. I'm the Senior Director of Client Acquisition for Songtrust. I've been here for just about 3 years now. My responsibilities are to really educate individual creators on the fundamentals of publishing and really helping them to maximize their royalty collection through the Songtrust platform. And I'm joined here today with Ben Patterson, who's the president of Dashgo, as well as Tammy Luttrell, who is the owner and founder of the Mezzo Agency, as well as being a multi-platinum and Grammy-nominated songwriter. I'll get our presentation up here. Let me just switch this. All right. So yeah, before we get started, I want to give Tammy and Ben both a chance to kind of introduce themselves, a little bit about their background. Tammy, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Thank you, CJ. So as he mentioned, I am a multi-platinum Grammy-nominated songwriter. I started off in the business about 17, 18 years old, about 20 years ago. And I have written for Whitney Houston, Keisha Cole, Monica, SWV. I've worked with Chameleonaire on a few projects and a few country placements as well. So, but yeah, I've been able to teach the business of music. I started in 2012 on my YouTube channel, and it just kind of grew from there. And more recently, over the last 2 years, I started the Mezzo Agency because I saw that there was a need for publishing administration, catalog management, and licensing help and assistance, as well as royalty collection. And so I'm happy to be a part of the team and collaborating with CJ and the team at Songtrust.
And Ben?
Sure. I'm Ben Patterson. I'm founder and president of Dashgo. My music business journey also started about 20 years ago. I ran digital for a management company called The Firm. I worked with a bunch of pop, rock, alternative artists, everyone from Weezer to Limp Bizkit to Dixie Chicks, Snoop Dogg. And at the tail end of my tenure there, digital music stores like Apple's, iTunes, and Napster were legitimizing and firing up, and took the opportunity to launch what's now Dashgo as a distribution channel for independent artists and labels. And that was my one good idea, and I've ridden it for the last 16 years. And now we're part of the Downtown Music family, still servicing the core mission of providing white glove distribution services to those, career artists and independent labels.
Awesome. Thank you both. So let's take a look at what we're going to go over today. I think what's going to help the most, right, is to get a good understanding of, what the different types of royalties and revenue streams that are being generated off of an original piece of music, what they are, where they're generated, who collects and accounts for those royalties, and then what an individual creator needs to do to access those. And if there's any services or companies that exist in the space to help you maximize the amount of royalties that you're collecting. So if you didn't get that sense from the session before, a lot of this stuff is very complicated and it goes very in depth. So definitely don't feel, discouraged if you're not picking it all up right away. I would definitely, suggest, afterwards, if you still have questions, songtrust.com has a lot of these resources available online. We have an amazing marketing team that's constantly putting out, help centers and blogs and educational resources. And, we host a lot of sessions virtually as well to really try to educate people on, what their rights are and how to make the best decisions possible for their career. So I would definitely suggest, taking a look at that, as well as, following us on socials and stuff like that as well. But just to get a little bit of an overview, again, so everyone understands, that the main concept behind a song is that it's broken up into two main copyrights, right? The master recording, which is the actual recording sound of a song, and then the composition, which is the underlying assets of that song, right? So the lyrics, the melody, all that makes up the master recording. And those then break down into their own individual royalty streams, right? So on the master recording side, we have the master recording revenue, as well as the neighboring rights, right? The performance royalties on the master. And then on the composition side, the performance mechanical royalties that are generated. So, Ben's going to touch on the master recording revenue. Tammy's going to touch on the neighboring rights, specifically in sound exchange. And I'll be covering the composition, the performance and mechanical royalties as we go through here. But yeah, let's jump right in and start with the master recording revenue with Ben.
I'm glad I get to go first because I'm also the simplest part of the revenue stream, at least historically. So the master recording is, as CJ said, the royalties that are due to a specific sound recording version of a composition. So it would be, Celine Dion's version of My Heart Will Go On, or, a very specific actual song. And that is typically controlled by a single rights holder, and the different royalty streams that flow into it go to a single payee ultimately. And then how that gets broken up afterwards is related to your own agreements with, band members or producers or labels that you've sold the rights to or licensed the rights to. So I was going to sort of start off quickly and just defining there's multiple collection models for how you collect and license that sound recording. I mean, obviously there is a huge business in DIY today. We're part of the same family as CD Baby. So if you're an artist, you can release your music on a service like CD Baby or DistroKid or a DIY platform, and they'll do the job of collecting sound recording income from the services for you. and you'll keep, you know, a giant share of that. And you may pay an annual fee or a percentage of that income as a collection. You may work with a record label where you license to a label or sell your masters to a label, and they will then go enter into deals with retailers to collect the income from that sound recording. And they will pay you a royalty or an upfront fee or an advance that's recoupable. I just want to kind of establish that there's, you know, there's very few scenarios where you're going to capture truly 100%, because in order to get money out of Apple or Spotify or even a Walmart or a Target or a used CD store, vinyl store, even if you're manufacturing your own goods, you're going to have a cost of goods of manufacturing that piece. And the rest of that royalty comes back to you based on the deals you've done with your partners and with your, distributors. So there's a few categories. There's, you know, physical product royalties. This is the simplest one. You get a wholesale price point for selling a vinyl record or a CD. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but basically, you know, you set a wholesale price, Amazon or a CD store, or you sell it on your web store, and you're going to get that wholesale price back for it. It's $10, $15, and usually there's going to be a markup by the retailer on top of that wholesale price, or a fulfillment charge. If you're using like a third-party service, it's going to charge you to ship that good to somebody else, plus whatever manufacturing costs you or the label has to absorb. Digital downloads pricing, again, a much smaller part of the world we live in today, but still existing on iTunes and Amazon MP3. Again, it's very much like the physical model. You're going to have a wholesale price point for that sound recording. Generally, it's around 60 to 70% range of what you see that retail price looking like. So if you see like $1.30 retail price range, that wholesale price is going to be somewhere in the 90-cent range, and that's gonna flow back to the sound recording, and it's going to contain a mechanical in there as well, at least in the United States, which CJ will touch on how that gets distributed. But that royalty then goes to the sound recording owner, be it an artist or a label, and they distribute it according to the royalty rules that they have. I think the area that everyone gets excited about, and also there's a lot of questions about how it's allocated, is the streaming royalty. And so streaming royalties, while a lot of people try to ascribe a per stream rate to streaming royalties, that's really trying to kind of force a new model into an old model bucket. And I think it's more helpful to really think of streaming as what it is, which is a royalty pool. So when you look at the income that goes to sound recordings from streaming services, be it YouTube or Spotify or Apple, all of them operate in a very similar fashion, which they take all the money from their subscribers, from their advertisers, and they break it up into a number of different pools. They put one for each territory that they operate in generally. They'll put one in for their ad-supported tier or their premium subscriber tier or their family subscription tiers. And then they pay out to the people who've provided the music, be it usually a distributor or a label group, on a pro rata share of usage from those pools. So effectively, the more your content is streamed, the more money from that pool that you will get. The reason a per stream rate is kind of an inelegant way of defining that royalty is because it varies wildly from a month-to-month basis. So your amount of money that's paid on a royalty basis could be much higher if your streams are coming solely from premium subscribers to a service versus advertising, free supported users. It could be much higher or lower based on the territory that those listeners are coming from and the price that they pay to access those subscription services. And it could vary just based on the overall usage of the service. If you had a tremendous number of subscribers, but they all stop listening to the service and still pay in, there's going to be a lot more money for the people who do get streamed in that royalty reporting period than other periods where there's actually really high usage by the subscribers or users of the services. So I kind of think of it, it's almost like a there will be blood, I drink your milkshake analogy, which is like there's a pool, and the royalties that come out to the sound recording side are really determined by how many people are consuming from that pool at the same time, how much money's in that pool, and how much specifically your sound recording or the sound recording that's your group represents is streamed or consumed in that period. There is most of these pools are relatively uncapped in that, like, they're always changing, right? So subscribers drop out, they go down, subscribers come in, they increase. In general, all of the services put between, in the low end, 50% to 50, 60% of the total revenue that they receive from subscribers into the sound recording bucket. And then other percentages are set aside for neighboring rights and publishing. Some of the services will have capped pools where they've set aside a certain amount of money that is the upper limit of the payout, and your usage is still determined on a pro rata basis of how often your song is streamed or used, but it's limited by how much total money is in the pool, which may not increase even if users increase. So you'll see that a lot with newer services that are being rolled out in the first year or two of existence, and they are unsure of their marketability, and have reached agreements with sound recording rights holders like labels and distributors to set an upper cap or ceiling on how much money they put into those pools on a initial term basis. And usually those are increased if the service is successful over time, or you'll see the service disappear after a while. So in terms of the, who collects and accounts for these royalties, generally it's going to flow through first to a distributor, be that a major label-owned one or an independent one. So, you've got your Universals, Sonys, Warners, BMGs. You've got, on the independent side, the Orchards, InGrooves, Believes, CD Babies, TuneCores, DistroKids, companies like myself, Dashco, the more bespoke distributors and aggregators. And we allocate those funds, on a client basis based on the consumption reports we receive from the DSPs. And on the label side, they probably have a lot more overhead to take out, or depends on the actual recording contract that they have and what they're going to take out. But if you're an individual creator and you're working on your own and you want to access these royalties, generally you're going to find a distributor that you feel comfortable with in terms of providing those services. Accurate reporting, solid distribution, transparent reporting is the stuff that we advocate you look for. And then a partner that you think is going to help you champion those recordings and maybe increase the usage and consumption with the DSPs. So there's plenty of companies that provide this service now if you're an independent artist. And I think the thing that you want to look for is somebody that you have a strong working relationship with, that you trust in their long-term viability and capabilities, that they're going to provide you accurate reporting, solve problems for you when there is a problem, make sure that you receive the support you need, and then you can determine how you want to pay for the sort of add-on services like marketing and promotion, whether that makes sense for you as a recording artist to bundle that into your distribution rate, or you want to hire a third-party agency to provide it, or you want to sell part or all of your copyright to a label in exchange for those services over a longer period of time. And then just to transition to Tammy, there's a portion of sound recording royalties that flow through what are called neighboring rights services that I'm sure she'll address heavily in her section.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ben. Simply put, neighboring rights are digital public performance royalties, and they are due to the sound recording copyright holder. When CJ explains to you guys about the other side of publishing, is usually, focused mainly on songwriting and producers. But on this side, with neighboring rights and digital performance royalties, these are specifically for the owners of the sound recording. So that means the record label and sometimes the artist that recorded the song. That royalty that is generated, it usually is from non-interactive streaming platforms. So you have Pandora, XM Satellite Radio, Music Choice even. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Music Choice on television, but these are all non-interactive streaming platforms that play music that don't allow you to actually choose which song to play. And so those royalties have to be paid out by law for those companies streaming that content, and it has to be paid out to the owners of the copyright, which is, like I said, usually the record label and the artist that has recorded that song. So Sound Exchange is, who we use to collect in the US. They collect as a public performance royalty organization, similar to a PRO like ASCAP or BMI, but they only collect on the sound recording side. And a portion of their royalties, about 45% of those royalties go to the featured artist or the artist. 50% of those royalties also go to the label, and there is a 5% that is actually carved out that's funded and administered by the AFM and SAG-AFTRA for distribution to non-featured artists. So producers, background vocalists, session musicians, they are also eligible to be paid if you have a letter of direction, LOD, from the artist or the record label or the rights holder. Because some artists are actually rights holders because they're indie labels. So I try to be careful to make sure to include everybody. And the good thing about that is if you are an independent artist and you write your own songs, you have your own label, you're able to eat off of that whole pie because you are the copyright owner as well as the artist that is, featured on the song. So it's a win-win on that side for the indie artists and the indie labels. What does an individual creator need to do to access these royalties? Very simple. You can register with Sound Exchange to collect these royalties. Once you have enrolled, you will be required to complete your setup, create an account, provide a catalog. They have a repertoire spreadsheet. If you are a featured artist, like I said, you have to have an LOD to even be able to receive any royalties, and it needs to be approved by the artist or the label. But the good thing about it is Sound Exchange is free. They don't charge any fees for setup, but they do charge a 4.6 administrative fee on the back end. If you are interested in this type of service, royalty collection, and maybe you're an artist that's been out for a minute, your songs have been playing on all these different streaming platforms, and you just really haven't found a way to identify where they are, where they're coming from. Our agency can help with Sound Exchange. My agency, the Mezzo Agency, we work to not only help you with managing your catalog, but organizing your repertoire. We speak the language with Sound Exchange because their setup is a tad bit different. Their formula for royalty shares is different, and they also require certain metadata that we are able to find, locate, identify, put on your repertoire to be able to upload and communicate with all of the different royalty societies that are sending these neighboring rights and digital performance royalties from all over the world. So you do have to have a domestic mandate as well as an independent mandate signed in order to collect all of these royalties. Again, we walk you through the entire process and work with them as well to ensure that your royalties will be coming in. And they also pay out monthly if you have everything set up domestically by direct deposit, or they will pay out quarterly. And that's similar to what most of the PROs do anyway, but it's all based on how you would like your setups to be distributed and if you meet the threshold for payouts. So any other questions, you guys can always DM me or email me at info@mezzoagency.com. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. So we'll move over to publishing now. I hope you all aren't too confused from everything we're going through. As I said, it's a lot of information, right, to take in. Unfortunately, publishing is definitely not an easy one to wrap up with. But I'll try to do my best to really simplify it in a digestible way. But something I kind of wanted to point out, which I always thought this was an interesting report that I read. Back in 2015, Berkeley did a report, and they published that between 20 and 50% of music royalty payments do not make it to the rightful owners, right? Like, that's how complex this part of the business is. There's so much opportunity for things to go wrong and for mismatched data and just things that incorrectly get sent to the wrong places. There's so much opportunity for error that it's really important that everyone understands really at least the fundamentals of how this stuff works, so that you can give yourself the best shot possible to be able to properly control this process from start to finish. A couple of the reasons that there's such this big gap in royalty collection is, I think, fundamentally, like, it comes down to three main things, right? There's a general lack of understanding about royalty collection, specifically around publishing, right? Creators aren't set up with the necessary information when they get into this business about how to accurately collect all their money, right? It's kind of like learn as you go, and it's never really prioritized. It's more about, it is an art form, right? People want to focus on the art, and the business usually takes a back seat to that. So there's usually an educational gap around just this fundamental aspect of royalty collection. But it's such an important part, because without it, you can't sustain that career in music. Also, the second point I think it comes down to is just the general complexities of a global royalty collection network, right? Like, we're not just working with a single organization to collect your money, right? We're working with all of these international pay sources, all with their own ways of operating, all with their own legal guidelines, with their own bureaucratic processes, right? Each one handles and operates in a unique way, and to try to navigate that, especially as an individual, is nearly impossible. And it's really important that everyone understands that all your money is everywhere in the world, especially now when you're working with companies like Spotify and Apple Music that have a global footprint throughout the world. People are consuming your music now easier and quicker in all these different territories and markets that used to be only accessible to these major artists that sign these major deals, right? But now an independent can go and put their music, through DistroKid right onto Spotify, and your music is now accessible in hundreds of markets throughout the world. So understanding that, yeah, your music is everywhere, which means it's generating royalties everywhere. And I think the third point it comes down to, why there's that big gap is, a general inconsistent and incorrect data process that's out there, right? There's really no standard in this industry for how things should be done. It's trying to work with, again, all these international societies, and everyone kind of wants to do things, their kind of way. And it's really hard for one country or one organization to tell the rest that, you should follow our process, or, this makes more sense, right? It's very hard to do that on a global scale. So there's a lot of opportunity for things to inconsistently match or just be entered incorrectly. And what publishing really is just a game of data matching, right? Like, we are just trying to take our clients' metadata and match it globally in all these other databases, so they can then match it back to the royalties that it's earned and then pay us for that. So I cannot stress enough the importance of your metadata. Without accurate metadata for your songs, like, there's no way that you can collect publishing royalties, right? Because there's nothing, if you don't have it and you're not able to provide it to your publisher, there's no way that we would be able to then match it and send it to the societies to then, be able to pay you. But yeah, so let's kind of get into some of, specifically the performance and mechanical stuff, right? But in order to, I think, really grasp those, I think we should take a step back a little bit and, what is a royalty? first off, right? A royalty is a percentage of the profit entitled to a creator or owner for the use of their intellectual property. So it's essentially, it's the money your song earns when it's used in some form. And how do you enforce that? You do that through licensing, right? So music licenses are legal agreements that are granting someone permission to use works for certain purposes or certain conditions, right? And these different pay sources are issuing these licenses, and then they're electronically track the usage of the music registered with them, and then they pay out the royalties. So these licenses ensure that songwriters earn the money for the use of their song while also protecting the licensee from being sued for illegal use of the music. So it's kind of like a win-win opportunity with a license, right? They ensure that there's money to go to the rights holder, as well as ensuring that the party using the music is not going to be sued for illegal use of that music. And now drilling down a little bit more just into performance and mechanical, we'll start with performance. How are they generated? Who collects them? What is a performance royalty? At its fundamental basis point, performance royalty is generated from the broadcast of your song in a public place or from the public performance of your song, right? So there's a lot of different ways that can happen. You can think of it, the first simplistic way is a live performance, right? Like you performing your music live or someone performing your music live at like a venue, right? Another way to think about it is a TV broadcast, right? If your music's playing and being broadcasted on TV, same kind of thing with radio. And it's not just, FM type of radio, but also digital radio. Radio is going to generate a performance royalty. Streaming also is generating that performance royalty, right? Because streaming can occur for like a Spotify. Streaming can occur like within a gym, at a restaurant, at a store, all these different places. All of that is a public performance. So these royalties are collected by pay sources in the country in which the music was consumed. Right. So if someone is streaming your song on Spotify, let's say in the US, the US PROs, which, BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, GMR, they're responsible for collecting the royalties for that stream. Now, if someone is streaming your song in, let's say, Canada, it would be the Canadian Society, SOCAN, that would be responsible for collecting that, and they have a license with, Spotify to be able to offer that blanket license to use the song and then collect the money for it. So yeah, they're responsible for issuing the licenses and then tracking and paying out the royalties again, right? So, and they do this through a few different means, right? So for radio, for instance, they're going to require broadcast logs from the radio stations to be able to track, right? For live performances, they use set list submissions that have all the different songs that were played at the performance. With streaming, they require the usage data reports to be sent back, right? So they can see which songs were streamed for how long and how many times and by which type of, as Ben said, there's not every stream is equal, even in that sense, right? Was it a 14-day free trial? Was it a freemium account completely? Was it a premium account? All of those things are going to change the rate for that stream. And even with TV, they're requiring cue sheets from the production companies to be able to track the usage of these things. So as you can see, even just with the performance side of the royalties, it's complex. There's a lot of different reports, a lot of matching, a lot of surveying that takes place. And it's definitely not a perfect system, right? With all of these different reports that they're requiring, there's still a lot of like human interaction with these reports of having to enter in song information, provide that data, send it back in, right? And with songs, a lot of times, like there's a lot of alternative titles. There's a lot of incorrect data that gets sent around. So there's a lot of opportunity for this process to not work perfectly. But it's a tough task that these societies are given, right? Like try to track all the usage of songs throughout an entire territory, right? It's an impossible task they're given. But they do a great job with all these different systems and ways of doing it. But it's really up to the creators as well to try to make sure that they're providing as much metadata, as much easily recognizable titles and information as possible, so that once those royalties are being generated, the societies can easily match to them. To go into mechanicals, this is a little bit different. I always thought it was interesting because when I first got into music, I didn't understand why they were called mechanicals. It seemed like a weird word, but it actually came from the piano rolls created for like piano players back in the day, and there was like a mechanical usage in order to play that automatically. So that was the first mechanical use of a song in order to play automatically. So that's where the term mechanical came from. And obviously, today a mechanical looks very different than a player piano, right? So there's a few of the main types of mechanicals that are out there, right? There's a physical reproduction, right? Will generate a mechanical royalty, right? So think about pressing a CD or vinyl, even cassettes, like that physical reproduction would generate the mechanical royalty. Digital downloads, any like an iTunes type of store, that's generating a mechanical royalty. But the most important one, I think, is interactive streaming now is generating mechanical royalties, right? And this is new in the last 10 15 years, really, and it's becoming a huge revenue piece that a lot of people don't realize, and a lot of people get confused. They think that there's this misconception that your master recording revenue is your mechanicals that's being collected from your distributor, like a DistroKid or CD Baby or Dashco, right? That's completely separate than the mechanicals that are being generated from streaming, on the publishing side. So they're two completely separate, different types of revenue streams that you need to know about, because it's growing and growing every day, really, that you need to be making sure that you're maximizing. So the ways that these royalties are calculated gets definitely complicated. The traditional, before streaming came about, there was for physical and digital downloads, they followed the statutory rate, right? Which is, unless it's separately negotiated, was the 9.1 cents for songs under 5 minutes, and the 1.75 cents per minute for songs over 5 minutes. That's set by the Copyright Royalty Board, the CRB. And that money is usually paid directly to the distributor or the label of the artist that's releasing the music, and then it's sent to the individual rights holders based on their percentage of ownership by the master recording rights holder, right? So then it's the label's obligation to then pay out the mechanical royalties to the songwriters based on their share of ownership, right? So with distribution, like digital distribution, it's a little bit different now, right? That money, if let's say you release your music on DistroKid and you sell a certain amount on iTunes, right? That money is going to be coming back in through DistroKid, and you would theoretically need to then send out those mechanicals to the co-writers and other copyright holders of the composition for that song. Once streaming came about, that model doesn't work anymore, right? Because there's just such a high volume that it's a completely different way of consuming music. So what the CRB did was, they set a minimum rate of 10.5% of the total monthly revenue of the streaming services, which is called the all-in royalty pool, right? And then what happens is performance royalties are first deducted from that all-in royalty pool before we're left with the remaining mechanical royalties that are payable, right? I think it's important also to note, back in 2018, the CRB did approve a rate increase of 44%, taking the 10.5% to 15.1% over a 5-year period, but it's currently still under appeal, so it hasn't completely taken effect. Yeah, that money is then sent to the local mechanical rights organizations the same way that it would be sent for performance royalties. It's sent with the usage data, so those mechanical rights organizations can match up the usage data with the royalties that are sent, and then assign it to the registrations that are within their database. So that's kind of the breakdown. I know it's a lot of information just for those two different royalty types, but there's so many different types of royalty types within the performance and mechanical royalties that, it does get very complex. But just understanding, there are performance, there are mechanicals, you need to be collecting both of them, and they're being sent usually to separate places is a really important concept. And it's also important to understand that, based on where your music is being consumed, that's really going to determine where the royalties are being sent for both the performance and mechanicals, right? So in the US, most of your mechanical royalties are going to be sent to Harry Fox Agency, HFA. Most of all of your performance royalties are going to be sent to either ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, or GMR. So once you get outside the US, right, there's all of these different pay sources that are collecting this stuff. So your stream, if someone's streaming your song on Spotify in the UK, right, your money is going to both PRS and MCPS, right, the performance mechanical agencies within that territory. And the best way to make sure that you're maximizing your royalties is to ensure that your songs are properly registered at as many of these global performance mechanical organizations as possible, especially the territories where your music's being consumed, right? Like if on Spotify through your Spotify or per artist page that you have these territories, outside the US, or, if you're not outside the US and it is the US, you need to make sure that your songs are properly registered in that society's databases so they can properly match an account and send that money back to you. And that's, one of the main concepts that I'm always trying to explain to people is, look at where your audiences are, look at where your music's being consumed, and make sure that you're getting your affairs in order in those places. A lot of times it becomes very challenging to affiliate and register your work in a lot of these places because of, the criteria that they have for, being able to directly affiliate. It's not always an easy thing. And that's where it becomes, as Ben was mentioning before, it becomes very important to partner with people and companies that you can entrust in doing this. Trying to do this on your own, it's nearly impossible to do globally at like 100%. Like you can go and probably do a few societies, but even then you're going to spend so much time just registering and checking copyrights and resolving conflict issues, and let alone the income tracking and auditing process. That's something that you probably won't be able to do that a lot of publishers like Songtrust are able to do for you. So yeah, the problem for many independents and creators is that trying to do this on your own is really too much of a task to take on. So in order to maximize your global publishing royalties, I think it's really important, again, to partner with a publishing company that has an expansive network throughout the world, that has a lot of these relationships already built in, that you will be able to tap into relatively quickly and ensure that you're covering the markets that are the most important to you. And I think it kind of also depends, where you are in your career. If you're at the point in your career where a traditional publishing deals are an option for you at all, right? Like you usually have to be, at a certain level of success to even get these types of deals presented to you. I mean, those could be an amazing opportunity because of, what they can offer with creative and promotional services as well. And you're getting those global networks usually. If you're not at that level, or if you're not interested in giving up ownership over your copyright, a publishing administration deal may be the best fit for you, right? And that's what we offer here at Songtrust. This allows you to gain access to those massive networks. We're working with over 43 different pay sources while still maintaining complete ownership over your copyright. And what the trade-off is the 15% commission for your royalties. But whichever one you choose, it's important that you ensure that the song data you're providing is 100% accurate to allow yourself the best opportunity to collect the most about your royalties for your work. So yeah, that was a long run through, I know, of all that, but just to kind of recap for everyone, there are the four kind of main, and this is what we call the checklist, right? For us to make sure that you're really collecting, right? You need to, ensure that you're working with a distribution partner that's going to be handling, digital, physical, and streaming, that one that you have a great relationship with that can then, kind of leverage that into marketing and creative opportunities for you to then be able to generate more royalties in the future. Publishing, obviously, just looking at the global landscape, doing that on your own is very, very tough, but it is an option. but I would definitely recommend partnering with a publishing company, whether that's a traditional publishing company or an admin company like Songtrust. One of the things we didn't really touch on, but is really important, is making sure that you are affiliated with a collection society, and this is on the publishing side, right? Without being affiliated with a collection society, you're not in like the publishing world. You're not a writer in the eyes of publishing, because you need to first take that first step in affiliating, getting a home society, getting assigned an IPI number, which is your unique identifier as a writer in the publishing world. And then you can begin, collecting your performance and mechanical royalties. If anyone on this call is not with a society already, you can actually sign up for Songtrust and we'll affiliate you with one for free. It's kind of like a good first step to get the process moving. And then, the neighboring rights aspect, right? Like if you're making sure that if you are, the master recording rights holder, that you're signing up for Sound Exchange, you're making sure, if you're not in the US, you're signing up with the local society. If you're in the UK, for example, it's PPL. But that makes sure that you're covering all these 4 bases, and then you should be, pretty much set. And so I think now we're at the Q&A section. Tammy and Ben, while I was talking out, did you guys see some good, cute questions you wanted to address?
I saw something flow through in there about YouTube in there, and I'm happy to just address that. In general, YouTube operates very much the same as Spotify or Apple, with the exception that it's much more heavily an advertising supported pool instead of a premium pool. Now that premium pool is increasing as they get subscribers to YouTube Music and to their sort of like ad-free version of YouTube. But the overall pool is still allocated the same way. It's like there's a whole bunch of streams happening on YouTube. The type of stream and sound recording usage that is, whether it's a sound recording embedded in a UGC video or a sound recording embedded in a music video, and where that's taking place in the world, and what type of user, be it a subscriber, non-subscriber, and what types of ads are being displayed and what ad rates those ads have at the time of display, are what's going to determine how much money is available to those users. So in that sense, there's a little bit more specificity about like the point of time in which a video is viewed and how much royalty that generates than like an overall kind of bucket of time, but it's still very much a similar proposition. There's a whole bunch of money coming in from advertising and some from subscriptions, and that's allocated out to sound recording based on where that usage is taking place and what type of user is consuming it.
So one question in here about, how do royalties apply to songs with leased beats? This is something we've seen come up a lot more frequently now, especially with BeatStars and a lot of these platforms really taking off, and it's a great, amazing opportunity for producers to be able to get additional revenue streams. I think it's always really important to look at what the contracts are for these beat leasing companies, right? A lot of them are different. There's no really standard to how it works. A lot of them will give certain types of access and permissions and rights for a certain amount of times, even certain amount of streams, which I don't seems kind of hard to track, but it kind of varies from contract to contract on how they're going to, whether you retain the rights in order to collect publishing royalties or any type of royalties, or whether you are signing over exclusive rights and all those royalties are now collectible by the person that you lease the beats to, right? So it really depends. There's no like real answer to that one, unfortunately.
There's another question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say on that leased beats topic, Dashco does help power BeatStars distribution platform. And the one thing that you want to be aware of with leased beats is, regardless of what the policy of the Beats licensor is and how you use it. certain DSPs, specifically YouTube, don't want content, including loose beats, delivered to their system unless you've taken pains to exclude the portions of that recording that are that least beat portion, because of the potential for, multiple versions of that same beat to create ownership conflicts around a sound recording. So, you've got a version of the song, there's somebody else who's leased the same beat who's got a version of that song. They all get entered into YouTube's content ID system. You're going to have an ownership conflict where YouTube doesn't know who properly owns the rights to collect on that because of the, basic beat or melody being the same as somebody else's recording that's in the system. It's still eligible for Spotify, for the subscription YouTube music service, but you want to keep it out of fingerprinting services generally, like SoundCloud or YouTube Content ID being the primary ones.
I was just going to touch on the question someone asked about YouTube and how the royalties are paid and split amongst the YouTube uploader and the content owner. And so for those who don't know, and CJ covered it briefly about microsync royalties, YouTube generates those microsync royalties, and it's generated in three ways. You have the visual component, the audio component, and the composition. The composition itself is what's being paid out to the songwriter and producer who composed the music, and it generates both a performance and a mechanical royalty that can also be collected through your publishing administrator like Songtrust. I did a very thorough video on my YouTube channel about this, in addition to all of YouTube's perks for video creators, as well as songwriters and producers, so that you know what to be expecting. Even as an indie label, you just need to know, because once you have your songs registered with your publishing administrator, and you're set up with Content ID and the fingerprinting service is there, anytime someone uploads your song, whether it's just someone who's a fan of your work, or if there's like a DJ who's uploading his favorite playlist to his channel, as long as your songs are registered properly through your publishing administrator, you will be able to see royalties from those pages that are garnering all of the different streams and views. So I definitely think you guys should check that video out for sure.
There's a question here. What about international non-US writer portion royalties? Do pub admins such as Songtrust also collect, distribute international non-US royalties from the writer side, or are these international royalties collected by the writer's PRO and distributed to the writers directly? So publishing companies typically only collect on the publisher share. The writer share is always going to be sent back to the writer's home society. So that's something that never comes through Songtrust. It's not something that we commission at all, right? So the answer is no. We don't collect on it. But while we're registering those songs internationally with all these different pay sources, they now know that your home society is whoever it may be, because our registration's in place, and they now know who to send the writer's portion of those royalties to. So working with a publishing company allows you to ensure that you're collecting more of your writer share. It actually helps even your co-writers collect their writer share, even if they're not working with a publishing company. Because if we send them the accurate data of the entire song with all the co-writers and their relevant publishing like IPI information, that international society now knows, okay, all the other co-writers on this song belong to these X, Y, and Z societies. We can send them their writer share now as well. So you're actually helping your co-writers by making sure that your work is globally registered.
I saw one in here. Do you need a UPC or ISRC to get radio play? Short answer is no. At least in the US, radio station can perform any song that's been commercially released in some fashion if they bought the CD at a store or whatever they found it. But it's going to make it hard to collect and account those royalties back to you. So ISRCs are generally free from a label or a, you can get it from RIA here in the US assigned to you if you need to get your own, or most of the distributors will provide it to you gratis. And that lives with that sound recording in perpetuity. So I would always recommend having that info, because once the radio starts playing that song, it's going to start generating royalties, performance royalties primarily, and without ISRCs to loop it up, the reporting on that may not be as accurate as you'd like it to be.
There's a question here about, let's really talk about how many pennies does one stream provide in total. I think it's everyone kind of has starting to understand that, based on the streaming service, will determine the amount of royalties that it's generating. YouTube, for instance, is very, very low per view for payouts. And then there's other streaming services that are going to pay more. I know, I think Deezer pays much higher than some of the other ones. But yeah, taking a look at the different rates that the streams are generating, and then understanding that, the master recording side is going to generate you a significantly more amount of money in revenue than the publishing side, just because of how it's historically been set up. It is also important to know. So what you see coming in from your distributor for the use of your music on streaming platforms is not going to be like a one-to-one on your publishing. The publishing side is significantly lower, but it's a matter of making sure that you're including all of these different revenue streams together, right? Because the hard truth is, if, especially with publishing, if you're not claiming this stuff, it goes into that reallocated bucket of royalties, the black box, and they send it out to other creators. Like it gets put into the market share kind of system where it goes to the top publishers, they give it to their top clients. So if you're not claiming this stuff in time, it is being sent to other people. There's no reason you should allow that to happen. So just making sure that, you are collecting, if it is a couple pennies, right? Those are your pennies. I wouldn't see why you should let someone else have them. But yeah, ideally it's more than pennies. So it all adds up. Ben, there's one here. As an indie artist, should I create my own label or in order to release my own music, or can I release it without a label? Also, will the full recordings of both of today's presentation be provided? I'm not sure about the recordings, but Ben, do you want to speak a little bit to the benefits, pros, cons of kind of self-releasing in a way versus working with a more traditional label?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the core question, if it's, should I create my own label to self-release? I don't think that's really necessary, unless you're really concerned about your legal liability exposure and have a house you want to protect from some sort of copyright infringement lawsuit, in which case you might want to incorporate a label to hold those assets, and that gets into a whole bunch of legal protection issues. But if you're just recording music that's your own and releasing it, you don't need a label entity per se to release it out there, and you can kind of just make up a DBA sort of display name via virtually any of the DIY platforms to have that content displayed under, whether it's just your artist name or a vanity label name that you've created. You don't have to go through the work of establishing an entity around that, again, unless you've got legal liability concerns that you want to follow through on. As for actually working with a label, like a proper label, versus doing a DIY approach, it's really going to depend on, the level of services you need, how you're willing to pay for those services ultimately. So, a typical label deal these days for most, non-major label deals are probably going to be a nominal, if any, advance, 50% or more of your master copyright, handed over to that label in exchange for some level of marketing commitment and investment in the sales and promotion of the sound recordings, maybe a recording fund, maybe access to some other in-house services that label entity has. It could be A&R skills, whatever. And that's if you find a label that you really trust the team with, and you think that they're going to be really strong champions for your recordings, and they really believe in you. That's great. You know, if you become a really hot superstar artist, you know, you've blown up a song on TikTok or something like that, you're probably gonna have a lot of labels coming to you, offering you significant cash advances against the royalties from that sound recording. And again, I think the calculation is the same. Do you think you can leverage up? Can they add value to the exposure of your sound recording, your song, versus doing it yourself? And by doing it yourself, that could be truly just uploading it to CD Baby and, you know, managing the relationships yourself. Or it could be working with a more, you know, bespoke partner like ourselves at Dashgo, or a company like, Symphonic or 1RPM that has in-house DSP sales and marketing services bundled into the distribution packages they offer. And you know, the variance there is that some of the promotional work and services that a traditional label would do is included as part of a distribution fee or package. And again, it's based on how you feel those companies' capabilities are for the type of music and type of artist you are, versus trying to sign it to a label or accepting an offer that a label's presented to you for your work.
Awesome. I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank both Ben and Tammy for joining us and for your insights into this very complicated part of the business. Again, you know, if you have other questions, please feel free to get in touch with us, to go to our websites. I know, you know, Songtrust, we have so much of this educational information documented and in easy digestible ways. My team holds a music publishing 101 twice a week, you know, for instance, so you can, you know, get caught up on this stuff and you can ask more questions and things like that. But yeah, thank you again, Ben and Tammy. You know, thank you, Music Biz, for allowing us to present.
Yes.
It's been great.
And I did try to answer some questions in the Q&A that I knew were just really quick for us to shoot off while Ben and CJ were talking. So I hope that helps.
Thanks everybody for spending your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are with us.
Yes, thank you.